This deep dive, this is going to be a tough one. We're going to be looking into the case of Michael Karl Geilenfeld,
Oh, yeah, this one's really going to make you think.
a man who, dedicated years of his life to running orphanages,
Yeah,
only to be convicted of abusing those same kids he was supposed to be helping.
it's hard to wrap your head around it.
Really makes you wonder how someone could, betray that kind of trust on such a scale.
Right, like how could this happen?
So our main source for this is a CBS Colorado news article.
Okay,
Really breaks down, the whole story from the initial accusations all the way to this recent conviction.
yeah, it lays it all out.
So let's get into it.
Let's unpack it.
What struck me right away was just the contrast.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, on the surface, you have this seemingly selfless guy
Right, totally.
devoted to helping orphans in Haiti. But then you see this other side, this dark reality,
Yeah?
years of alleged abuse.
It's like a textbook case of how looks can be deceiving.
It really is.
So let's start with some basics. Who is Michael Karl Geilenfeld?
So the article says he's 73 years old from Littleton, Colorado. And get this, back in 1985, he founded St. Joseph's Home for Boys in Haiti.
Wow, so we're talking decades running this orphanage.
Decades. It paints this picture, right, of someone who's just purely altruistic, someone who gave their life to helping these vulnerable children.
It's almost hard to believe, right? I mean, you have this image of this compassionate caregiver, and then bam, you're hit with these heavy charges.
Yeah, no kidding. On February 24th, 2025, Geilenfeld was convicted in Miami. And the charges are serious. 1 count of traveling for illicit sexual conduct.
Okay, so in this case, that means...
Basically crossing international borders to engage in illegal sexual acts.
Wow.
And then there's 6 counts of actually engaging in illicit sexual conduct abroad.
So this is not, like a minor offense.
Not at all. We're talking up to 30 years in prison. And sentencing is set for May 5th.
30 years. Okay, so those are some serious charges, but what exactly led to the conviction?
Well, 6 men who lived at St. Joseph's Home for Boys between 2005 and 2010,
Okay.
they testified about the abuse they experienced.
It's hard to imagine how difficult that must have been.
Incredibly brave of them. Their testimonies were really key in bringing this case to light and getting this conviction.
I can only imagine how much strength that took, but the article also mentions 4 more victims.
Yeah, that's right.
They testified even though their cases weren't part of the specific charges.
Right, right.
What's that all about?
It makes you think, right? Like, maybe this wasn't a one-time thing. Maybe there was a pattern of abuse going on at the orphanage.
Yeah, like a systemic problem.
Exactly. It raises a lot of questions, like, how could this go unnoticed for so long? Or worse, how was it ignored?
That's where the story gets even more interesting. The article talks about this activist, Paul Kendrick. Apparently, he was instrumental in getting this whole thing going.
He was.
He started making accusations against Geilenfeld way back in 2011.
Yeah, his involvement is really interesting.
So what was his motivation? What made him get involved in this whole mess?
Well, it goes back to another case. You might remember Douglas Perlips.
Refresh my memory.
He ran a school for homeless youth in Haiti and was convicted of sexual abuse back in 2010.
Oh, right.
Seems that case kind of opened Kendrick's eyes to what could be happening in these places that are supposed to be protecting kids.
Yeah.
He saw the need to speak up for those who couldn't speak for themselves and became, well, you could say he was relentless in seeking justice for the alleged victims.
So Kendrick is this key figure in all of this, but getting Geilenfeld convicted wasn't a walk in the park, right?
Definitely not. In 2013, Geilenfeld and this nonprofit, Hearts of Haiti, they supported the orphanage. They sued Kendrick.
Wait, so the guy who's later convicted of child sex abuse is suing the activist trying to expose him? For what?
Defamation.
Wow, that's something else.
And it really backfired on him. That lawsuit, the one meant to shut Kendrick up, it actually became a major turning point in the case.
Okay, now I gotta hear more about this lawsuit.
So in 2016, the court actually ruled in favor of Geilenfeld and Hearts of Haiti. They were awarded, get this, $14.5 million.
Whoa!
Yeah. Seemed like a huge defeat for Kendrick and for the victims, really. But here's the thing.
There's a twist, isn't there?
The judgment was overturned.
Really? How?
Technicality. And Kendrick's insurance ended up settling with Hearts of Haiti for $3 million.
Okay.
And the kicker is Geilenfeld got nothing. And all the defamation stuff against Kendrick was dropped.
So the attempt to silence Kendrick just brought even more attention to the accusations against Geilenfeld?
It's like they say, sometimes trying to hide something just makes it more obvious.
Makes sense. And I'm guessing all that attention led to Geilenfeld's arrest.
You got it. He was arrested in Littleton, Colorado in January 2024. But here's another thing. His operation wasn't just limited to St. Joseph's. According to some sources, like a Miami Herald, he was connected to multiple orphanages in Haiti until 2014, even set one up in the Dominican Republic.
So we might be looking at a much bigger picture here.
Yeah, raises a lot of questions. Were there similar things happening at these other places? It's a scary thought.
It is. And how did he get away with this for so long?
It's the question everyone is asking, and it points to a bigger problem. It's not easy to investigate and prosecute these cases, especially when you're dealing with different countries, power dynamics, and vulnerable kids.
It's just incredibly disturbing. So where do the victims go from here?
That's what we're going to get into next, but for now, let's shift gears a bit. Let's look at the psychological side of this. How does someone, especially someone in a position of trust, do something like this? What's going on in their mind?
Yeah, good point. We'll come back to that after a quick break. We've been talking about this really disturbing case of Karl Geilenfeld,
Yeah,
convicted of abusing kids in his care at these orphanages he ran in Haiti and the Dominican Republic.
right.
It's hard to understand how someone could do this,
It is.
especially in a place that's supposed to be caring for vulnerable children.
Yeah, you'd think that'd be the last place something like this would happen.
So, from a psychological perspective, how does this kind of abuse even happen? Like, how do these guys gain the trust to pull this off?
It's usually not something that happens overnight.
Right.
It's a process. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like this calculated manipulation. They call it grooming.
Grooming, okay.
And abusers, like Geilefeld, they often target places where they have power and where they have access to, vulnerable people.
Makes sense.
They come across as, charming, caring,
Right, right.
maybe even heroic. They shower their victims with attention, gifts, special treatment.
So they build up this, like, false sense of trust.
Exactly. And they do it little by little,
Yeah.
breaking down their defenses and then isolating them from anyone who could protect them.
So it's not always just physical force or threats?
No, not always. It's more about creating this messed up dependency, making the victim feel like they need the abuser.
Wow.
And this is especially effective in places like orphanages, where kids are already lacking stability and might be looking for that, love and security. The abuser takes advantage of that, becomes the only source of what they need.
It's awful. It's like they trick these kids into thinking the abuse is normal. Or even loving.
Yeah, that's how it can go on for so long without anyone knowing. They create a wall of secrecy,
Yeah.
use threats, intimidation to keep the victims quiet. And a lot of times the kids blame themselves.
Oh, that's just heartbreaking.
It is. They feel ashamed or afraid to tell anyone. And the power dynamic is so skewed that they don't even realize it's abuse.
It makes you appreciate the courage it took for those men to come forward.
Oh, absolutely.
And Paul Kendrick, the activist, he really kept pushing even after that defamation lawsuit.
That lawsuit, that was a classic move, trying to silence the whistleblower.
Yeah.
Shows just how far they'll go to protect themselves. But it didn't work. In fact, it kind of had the opposite effect. More attention, public outrage. Probably even push law enforcement and take it more seriously.
Like shining a light on the cockroaches, they scatter.
Exactly. And it shows why people like Kendrick are so important. They speak for those who can't speak for themselves.
Right.
Challenge these powerful people and institutions. Demand accountability.
Speaking of institutions, this whole case really makes you think about the systems that are supposed to be protecting these kids, not just in Haiti, but everywhere. What can we do to stop this from happening again?
That's the big question, isn't it? There's no easy answer. But there are things we can do. First off, we need to have stronger child protection policies in place
Okay.
in any organization that works with children.
So like stricter background checks for staff.
Yeah. And mandatory reporting if someone suspects abuse. Plus, training to help people recognize the warning signs.
So it's not enough to just have the policies, right?
Right.
It's got to be part of the culture.
Exactly. A culture of vigilance. Everyone needs to be on board. From the top down.
And what about those international organizations?
Yeah.
The ones that fund these places? Do they have a role to play?
Absolutely. They have a responsibility to do their homework, make sure their money isn't going to a place where abuse can happen. They need to ask the tough questions about child protection, staff training, how they handle reports. Transparency and accountability are key.
So it's not just about throwing money at the problem.
Nope.
It's about promoting a culture of child protection.
You got it. And that's going to take a lot of effort, more awareness, stronger laws, more funding for child protection programs. And we need to address the root causes, poverty, lack of education, that kind of stuff. Those things make kids more vulnerable to exploitation.
So we need to educate communities too, not just the institutions.
For sure. We need to be talking about this more openly. Challenge those attitudes that allow abuse to continue. Create a society where kids feel safe and empowered to speak up.
And where abusers know they'll be held accountable.
Exactly. We need to make it clear that this kind of behavior won't be tolerated.
It's a lot to think about. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this. But I guess the important thing is that we all have a role to play.
That's right. We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix it. Every little bit helps.
So this case, as horrible as it is, it can be a starting point.
Absolutely. It's a wake-up call.
It forces us to see the reality of abuse and do something about it.
Exactly. We can't let these stories be forgotten. They need to fuel our commitment to creating a world where every child can grow up safe and free from this kind of exploitation.
Powerful words. This deep dive has been really insightful, but definitely emotionally heavy. But what about the victims? Where do they go from here? What does justice look like for them?
That's a great question and one we'll explore further as we wrap up this conversation. But for now, let's acknowledge the incredible courage of the survivors who came forward. They broke the silence, and with the help of advocates like Paul Kendrick, they made justice possible. Their stories show the resilience of the human spirit, and they remind us that even in the darkest times, healing and accountability are possible.
It's been a lot to process, all the details of the Karl Geilenfeld
It
case,
has.
the accusations, the conviction, the fact that this was allowed to go on for so long.
Yeah.
But, it's easy to forget about the people who are most affected by all of this, the victims. What does justice even look like for them?
It's a good question. And it goes beyond just, the legal stuff. The conviction is important.
Right.
It holds them accountable. But it doesn't take away the pain and trauma they went through. Real justice has to include healing for the survivors.
So it's more than just punishment for the abuser, but what does healing look like for someone who's been through something like this? I mean, how do you even begin to recover from that kind of betrayal?
It's a long road, and it's different for every person.
Right.
For some, it might mean therapy,
Okay.
support groups, maybe finding ways to rebuild their sense of self-worth.
Yeah.
For others, it might be about finding their voice, sharing their story, connecting with other survivors. There's no one right way. But the important thing is that they have access to the resources and support they need to heal.
And it sounds like healing isn't just about dealing with the emotional scars.
No,
It's also about rebuilding trust. Trust in themselves, trust in others, even trust in the systems that failed them.
exactly. Trauma can really shake your sense of safety and make it hard to connect with people. Part of healing is learning to trust, again, learning to set boundaries and find healthy relationships.
It's a lot to overcome, and we should remember that healing doesn't mean forgetting what happened.
Right.
It's about finding a way to move forward with strength.
It's about integrating that experience into their life in a way that makes them stronger, not letting it define them.
We've talked a lot about the institutions and what they need to do to prevent this, but what about us as individuals?
Yeah.
What can we do in our everyday lives to create a world where kids are safer?
It starts with being aware, learning the signs of abuse, understanding how these predators operate,
Yeah.
and how they silence their victims. We have to be vigilant in our communities, in our schools, even in our families. Abuse can happen anywhere, and it's up to all of us to speak up if we see something that's not right.
So it's not enough to just rely on the authorities.
No.
We have to create a culture of protection ourselves.
Exactly. We can challenge harmful attitudes, support organizations that are fighting abuse advocate for better laws, and most importantly, we have to believe and support survivors when they come forward. We need to create a world where kids feel safe, where they know they can speak up and be heard.
That idea of believing survivors, that seems really crucial.
It is.
It seems like they're often silenced or disbelieved, even blamed for what happened to them. We need to change that.
Absolutely. It takes so much courage to come forward. And when they do, we need to meet them with compassion and listen to their story without judgment. We need to validate their experience and support their healing.
This whole conversation has been really tough but important. It's made us face a difficult reality and think about what we can do to protect children.
It has.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this, but I guess the key takeaway is that we can all make a difference.
Absolutely. Every little bit counts. Every time we raise awareness, have a conversation, or choose to believe a survivor, we're helping to create a safer world.
This case, as awful as it is, it can be a catalyst for change. It can start conversations, challenge the way we think, and inspire us to take action. And that's where the hope lies in our commitment to building a world where kids are safe, valued, and empowered to speak their truth.
Well said. It's not just about one case. It's about changing the way we think about and address child abuse. It's about moving from silence to action.
And that's a fight worth having. Thanks for listening.